Hello and welcome to Talking Aussie Books, a weekly podcast bringing readers and writers of Australian fiction together. I'm Claudine Tinellis. As an avid reader and passionate advocate for Australian fiction, I make it my mission to spotlight local talent. So if you're looking for your next read or simply want to learn more about the Australian literary scene, this podcast is for you. Grab yourself a cuppa, sit back and relax. Listeners, I was lucky to cross paths with my next guest at a couple of events last year and learned to my delight that she was on the cusp of making the transition from aspiring author to published author within a few short months. Under the Influence was published by HarperCollins' Harlequin Escape in September of 2022, officially launching the lovely Karina May's authorial career. But if that wasn't enough, Karina soon landed herself a 2-book deal with Pan Macmillan, the first of which, called Duck à l'Orange for Breakfast, what a fabulous title, is due to land on shelves across Australia in late March. Reading Duck à l'Orange for Breakfast was a true delight on many levels. Fun, romantic, satisfying, and oh so delicious, with 14 delectable recipes to sink your teeth into. This book is rom-com, foodie-fiction, and armchair travel rolled into one gorgeous story that will leave you wanting more. More of everything. And if that doesn't pique your interest, think Julie and Julia meets the Flatshare with a bit of Emily in Paris thrown in for good measure. With its warmth, humour and witty dialogue, I cannot recommend this book highly enough for romance fans or those who enjoy reading about delicious food and incredible travel destinations. And so it gives me such pleasure to welcome Karina to the podcast today. Hi, Karina.
Hi, Claudine. Thank you so much for that beautiful intro. I've obviously listened to your podcast for years, so this is a bit of a pinch me moment that I'm here now as your guest.
Oh, that's so nice for me to hear that. Thank you. That's really generous of you. Look, I'm just so delighted to see this book make its way out into the world at last. I wanted to say formally, congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, when you were reading my intro there, I thought, wow, I have been busy, haven't I? It's been a busy time.
You have been busy indeed. Now, I know Duck à l'Orange is not your first published book, but it's your first print book to be published. So I wanted to ask you, is your experience vastly different to the release of Under the Influence in that respect?
Yeah, I have found it very different. I think in terms of the editing process, actually. So there was a lot of stages, which I welcomed as well, but were very thorough internally with Pan Macmillan, from copy editing of the recipes, because there's some recipes included in the book, and that's a whole different art, which obviously I was not aware of, from structural edits to proofing multiple sets of pages, which wasn't really the process for the digital publication. So I've really enjoyed this print publication process.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, I know the book is getting a lot of love ahead of its release, which is brilliant and so thoroughly deserved. But I wanted to ask you, does that make you any more or less nervous about publication day?
Oh, I mean, I think I'm just a ball of nerves. Anyway, I posted today to say that, yeah, I'm crying a minimum of 3 times a day at the moment, but I think it's mostly happy tears, but it's very overwhelming, I think, for a dream to be realized, and the anticipation of it finally hitting shelves, something that was in my brain, that's now going to be, people are going to be curled up in bed, I hope, or on the beach reading this. So it's very surreal.
Oh, just wonderful. I'm so excited for you. I know what's in this book and I know how much people are going to love it. This is just brilliant. So, Karina, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about the story.
Sure. So the story centers around Maxine Mayberry, Max, who we meet at a really hard time in her life. She's just found her long-term boyfriend in bed with another woman, and she's also being diagnosed with a benign brain tumor. So she moves in with her bestie, Alice, and Alice suggests that signing up to Tinder might be a perfect distraction to kind of while away the weeks before her surgery and also to get over her heartbreak. And she meets lovely, charming Tinder match Johnny. And together they start to cook through the recipe book of Max's ex's family, who are a pretentious French family, the Laurent family, as kind of like a healing exercise, a very deranged Julia and Julia move, but without ever having met. So the cookbook drop is done at an IKEA, which is one of my really, really fun parts of the story that I enjoyed writing. And the story travels to Paris as Max kind of searches for the life that she wants Yeah, it's full of recipes and fun, quirky, and it was a joy to write.
I can only imagine how much fun you had with this book. I'm going to get back to this IKEA thing in a second.
Yeah.
One of the quirkiest parts of this book I found, but absolutely delightful. But I wanted to ask you, well, I wanted to chat to you a little bit more, Karina, about the part of the book that was based on some of your own personal experiences, some character traits that you gave to Max that were part of your personal experiences. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how did it inspire the story as a whole?
Yeah, sure. So, a benign tumor is something that I was diagnosed and underwent surgery in 2019, brain surgery in 2019 and 2020. So, I had two surgeries. So, that definitely is an autobiographical element to the story. That is the type of health crisis that Max is facing. And I actually had the idea for the story when I was, waiting for my first surgery and just all the feelings and emotions. And the biggest, I guess, question I had or concern was that I was going to wake up different. Technically, where my tumor was located wasn't near anything where I should have a personality change. But what it did was, I think, really crystallize how important, my creativity and my writing and just really how much I liked myself that I was just so concerned that I was going to wake up different. And then I had the idea for the story not long after the surgery, just, processing a lot of the emotions I had gone through. But I think it's that typical thing of maybe write from scars and not wounds. So I did start penning a couple of things and then realized that maybe it was a bit too fresh. And then subsequently, I had to go in for a second surgery. That surgery, I now joke about that it was my field research because by that point, I already knew that I wanted to write this story. I mean, it wasn't in the shape it's in now, but I wanted to write about someone that was coming up against something that was really scary that I guess put in sharp focus the things that were important. So it was that surgery that I was noting, all the sounds in ICU. And I just thought, you know what, I'm going to use this. So content at its finest.
Oh, I love that. I'm sorry to hear that you had to go through that. But I mean, I think and I think I might have said this to you once before, that I feel like it gave such authenticity to Max's experiences. And it really felt like you were there with Max. As a reader, we were there with Max when she was going through this.
Yeah, thank you, Claudine. And I think it was actually nice to turn something was obviously not my favorite experience into something that was so joyful. So that's been really rewarding for me. I mean, there's a point in the book that actually did happen. A lot of it is fictionalized, where Maxine asks for her earphones in ICU to listen to an audiobook because she just wanted to check that her brain was still working the way that it had been previously. And that's something that I actually did. And I was told at the time that that was the first time that they had ever been requested to listen to an audiobook in ICU. So, of course, that had to make its way into the story.
Indeed, absolutely wonderful. Not that that experience was wonderful, but I loved the way you brought all of those experiences to the page and just made it feel so real for us as readers.
Thank you.
Now, as you mentioned before, Max has an obsession with IKEA, something she and I definitely do not have in common. She calls it the mothership. Is this another quirk of yours that you've passed on to Max, or is this wholly hers? And why is it important to the story?
Absolutely not. Yeah, I know it's a controversial one. I'm definitely in the camp of let's get in and out and try and avoid IKEA. My younger sister loves IKEA, so she definitely drags her fiance there on the weekends. But the idea for that came actually when we're in lockdown, and I had to go to the Homebush vaccination centre, and I thought I need to pick up some photo frames. I'm going to drop into IKEA as a treat because it was a time where nothing was open. And it was there. I was walking around. I think at that time we were so deprived of anything sensory. I thought, wow, this is amazing. Like, look at these little homes. And I was writing the story already. And I was trying to think of a place where Max and Johnny could do an exchange of the recipes that they cook. And IKEA just felt like the perfect place to me in that moment. So that's where that idea came from.
And why was it important to Max? I mean, it's a bit of a haven for Max in many ways, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think, it's the one place where she can kind of forget everything else that's going on, walk the aisles. Yeah, people watch as well. So she's an aspiring writer, so she loves stories, and it's the perfect place to observe couples and, fights. And we all know what the IKEA experience is like. So it was the one place where she could forget herself and her problems. So as the story goes on, that definitely becomes a very important part of the story and a coping mechanism for her, I guess.
Now, Karina, one of the standout things about your writing is the travel. In Under the Influence, you send your protagonist off to Peru and to Machu Picchu. In Duck à l'Orange for breakfast, it's no surprise you send Max to France, first to Paris and later to Rouen. And going to those places is a big part of Max's emotional journey in this novel. So, why is travel such a big part of your writing, do you think?
I think probably because I have done quite a lot of it. I've been privileged enough to travel quite a lot, especially in the last 10 years. I was working as a magazine journalist and changed careers to become a digital marketer. And working for myself meant working freelance. I could be a bit nomadic in my lifestyle and work. So I've spent the last decade spending a lot of time in different cities and places and working from there. And that's really where my writing started, where I finally felt that I had the capacity to come alive in these places. I think my observational skills and everything is switched on and alert when I'm in a new place, and it's where I feel most inspired. Of course, I can't always be writing from Paris, so I still try and bring that element in my day to day, whether that's visiting a new cafe or going on a different walk. I just find that the newness is what inspires me the most. And at the time, obviously, I wrote this book, during the pandemic. Armchair travel was something that I aspired to, I think, like a lot of people. And Paris was one of the last places that I visited in the end of 2019 before the world kind of shut down. So I think I just enjoyed revisiting it in words, if I couldn't get on a flight and go there.
Fantastic. Now, you mentioned that Max goes on Tinder and meets Johnny, and the Fork Him project is born. Where did the idea for that come from?
Do you know what? I used to have a flatmate, and I think I am allowed to tell this story. I just won't name names. This was years ago. But when she moved in with me, we randomly found a cookbook of her sister's ex-boyfriend's family. And we thought it would be really funny to cook some of the recipes. It wasn't French. We probably cooked a few before her sister found out and thought it wasn't funny at all. But I think the idea always stayed with me. It tickled my fancy to think that, someone's Colonel's 11 herbs and spices, secret herbs and spices was being leaked out there. And there was these random girls that were cooking through these recipes steeped in history. And yeah, I think it was like a beef stroganoff and an apple pie. It was very kind of homely recipes. And it just gave us the giggles. So I think I just held on to that idea. And I was trying to come up with something that Max could do to pass time. And it just occurred to me that the Fork Him project would be the perfect escape.
And it certainly was. What a way to pass the time. Absolutely lovely. I loved that each of the recipes that Max and Johnny cook from the Laurent family cookbook are reproduced in the back of the book, but have been given a change of name. Some of them I don't think I can repeat in the recording. Listeners will just have to buy their own copy to find out what I mean. I mean, it's a clever way of shining a light on the kind of person that Max's ex, Scott, really was. And it gives Max a different lens through which to view the nature of her relationship with Scott, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. I think in the story, we meet Max as kind of a gaslit girlfriend. And by the end, we hope that she has found her self-worth. A note on the recipes is that I actually don't really cook. I don't speak French and I don't cook. So how I ended up with this book, I'm not sure. So I had to ask a dear friend to help me. He's living in Geneva at the moment. So he has access to some beautiful produce, being so close to France, and has an interest in cooking, always has done. Yeah, he came on board with this even before I had my publishing deal. So I'm obviously so appreciative to him that he wanted to be a part of this, because I just kind of felt as a reader, that was what I would be expecting if I read a book about cooking. And so I was like, how can I do this? It's going to take me a while, I think, to start from scratch with my chopping skills. So I was so grateful to him.
Oh, I just love that. And the recipes do sound so delicious, despite the titles, despite what they're called.
Yeah, unbelievably, I've cooked one of them actually, but my publisher has been cooking his way through them. So I guess someone had to test them. I mean, obviously they were tested. Some of them look quite complicated, so I'm not sure. I'm kind of a Carrie Bradshaw keeps sweaters in my oven kind of gal. So I should cook the recipes that are in my own book.
Oh, that's hilarious. I love it. Picking up on something that you just said, I thought that one of the more serious themes that you explored in this book was the kind of toxic relationship that Max had with Scott. And I thought it was gaslighting, and you've confirmed that it was. He kind of makes Max feel like she's not good enough. And then without, I don't want to give away spoilers, but he takes something from her. And it takes a while for her to see the truth of what's happening, doesn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I've had some early readers just say how much that mirrors, unfortunately, experiences that they've had in the past. So it's something that I wanted to explore because, unfortunately, I think that type of toxic relationship is very common.
Max's stay in Rouen with Suzette was key to her finding the courage to chase the kind of life she really wanted for herself, wasn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I think that probably plays into some of the travel I've done. I often try and stay in Airbnbs where the host lives in the home for that authentic experience. So I've never done it there. I know the great conversations and just maybe an outside perspective, someone that's not in your world at all, and the type of advice or what they can offer to you, especially if it comes at such a crossroads as it did for Max,
Yeah.
can be really life changing to the point where I am in contact with some Airbnb hosts because I don't really think they realize sometimes that, a traveler passing through, they can have such a pivotal impact on their stay or their lives.
So why Rouen? Had you been there before? Was it a place that you wanted to spotlight, or was it completely random?
Really completely random. I've not been there, so I had to do quite a bit of research. I initially had her traveling somewhere else from Paris, but I wanted somewhere that was a bit closer to Paris, that I thought was a bit more realistic for the story. And then I had kind of just Google searched and thought that that was a perfect place. And then I was rewatching Julia and Julia, which I watched a couple of times while writing this, and listened to a lot of French music to get me in the mood. And that actually appears in the movie. So I thought, okay, right, that's the perfect place. And then I found out something about the name of the place, which I don't want to give away, that just really felt like a very serendipitous, right, this is perfect. So it just kind of fell into place with the plot. And now I want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. You must.
Yeah.
You must.
Yeah.
And find your own Suzette.
Yeah. Yeah. Google's amazing now, though, with Street View. And yeah, there's a lot that you can find out. But I mean, it can never completely replace visiting.
Now, we talked a little bit about the fact that cooking forms such a big part of this book, obviously. But it also turns out that John's family recipe for baklava making it into the back of the book as well. And I loved that his family were from the Greek island of Lesbos, where incidentally my husband's family also hail from. So where did the Greek element come from?
Yeah, so in the back of the book, I acknowledge my brother-in-law and his family. They're Greek. I think maybe I've been around it. He's been in the family for 15 years, probably more actually. So I've been invited to a lot of Greek Easters, and food, I think, is always at the heart of those events. So it just kind of worked its way into the story. And then obviously it was very handy having him kind of at the end of my phone to answer any questions. And then, yeah, his mum was kind enough to offer me her baklava recipe, which his sister translated out of Greek into English. So it was a whole family affair. So I kind of say in the book that any mistakes that I make about, Greek food or words, entirely my own, because they definitely were so helpful and generous with their advice. And it felt really nice to include them in the story. When I got the advanced copies, I realized that my brother-in-law's mother's name are the last two words of the book. And yeah, that felt really special as well.
Oh, that is lovely. Beautiful to have that family connection in the book. And I didn't pick up on any mistakes myself on the Greek part of it.
My brother-in-law actually did. I think, you can get quite technical with, there is some swear words. Um, and yeah, in the context. So I was told that I didn't provide him enough context for some of the words. So then when he read them in sentences, we made a couple of tweaks. But I think we were just, wanting to get it completely accurate.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, there's no way I could have done it without them.
Some of the things that Johnny said just made me laugh out loud. It was really quite funny and really well done.
Oh, good.
If there was one thing that you would like readers to take away from this novel, what would it be?
I think I always want to read something that's funny and light, but heartwarming and makes me feel deeply. So I hope that when they finish the book, it's the type of book that they just want to hug and feel I can do anything. I feel uplifted. I get to write my own story and it's all within me. So, yeah, I definitely want kind of that feel good message to stay and obviously have a lot of laughs with the bumps along the way. But ultimately, I think that's the message of the book.
Yeah, beautiful. Karina, with a background in magazine journalism, as you mentioned, how did you make the leap to novelist? And was this always something you wanted for yourself, or did that dream materialize quite late?
I think I had never thought about writing creatively until I did move jobs. So I moved just because, unfortunately, the magazine landscape with digital, there was a lot of cuts. So I thought I should skill up. And when I moved to digital marketing, I just found that I was writing less for a job or writing less. So you'd be writing copy, but it would be a headline and not too much in the type of work that I do. And I just found that I had this creative itch that appeared and I had always been a big reader, but I had never written creatively. So I firstly just started to write little stories, little vignettes of funny things that kind of had happened in my day. And from there, it kind of expanded. I suddenly had this idea that I maybe wanted to write a book. So I enrolled in an Australian Writers Centre course, a 6-month write your novel course with Pamela Freeman, and kind of then learnt that to write a book, there's more structure involved than just stringing together some short stories. And ultimately, my goal was just to finish something, but then I got a taste for it. Yeah, this is something now that I kind of feel I was born to do and would love to continue doing it for as long as possible. It just, yeah, that's why it's so pinched me that I get to kind of make up stories now and people want to read them. So, yeah, it was more of a gradual process. Obviously, I always had an interest in writing and comms, but it was more of the nonfiction.
Karina, with all of your experiences to date, I wondered if you had any tips for aspiring authors who listen to this podcast.
Yeah, totally. I mean, as I said, I listened to this podcast for years and it's the main source. Podcasts and writerly books, craft books is what I think keeps you going, to hear how other authors write and to find out what their process is. And I think within that you can sometimes get a bit muddled as to what your process is. So I think my number one tip would be to soak it all in and hear from your peers and what's working for people. But ultimately, you need to find what works for you. So that might be writing every day, or it might not be. It might be writing a really quick first draft, or it might be taking your time. I think you can listen to yourself and work out maybe what motivates you to sit down at the desk, because a lot of it obviously is the grunt work of just sitting there. So I think finding the process that works for you and then finding the people. There's no way I could have finished anything without some great people surrounding me that I've met in writing courses that held me accountable and just kind of got the crazy creative pursuit journey that we're all on and willing to chat about plot and get as excited about your story and characters as you, and equally, you investing back in their story. So yeah, finding your process and finding your people, I would say, are my top tips.
Karina, I understand from looking at your website that you run something called the Listening Station Book Club. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Totally, yeah. So that's a new initiative that's based on Sydney's Northern Beaches. So the Listening Station is run out of Art Bow, which is an art gallery in Brookvale. And we invite the author of the month, so the book that we're reading, for an in conversation, and I interview them in the art gallery. So we just love that we're hosting it. The art gallery owner and I, so Frankie Morgan, we're hosting it in a creative space. I think sometimes space is an issue. So where to meet, or it might be a space that's a bit sterile and not conducive to ideas and creativity. So we just love the idea of having these monthly book clubs in an art gallery, which is a space that's literally designed for creating art. So we'll be running them all year, and we normally, have our program a couple of months in ahead. So it's public, so anyone can come along, book a ticket. We have snacks and Aperol, and local artists are featured. So it's been a really fun initiative to date.
Yeah, fantastic. And so if people wanted to learn more about that, how can they find out about it?
Yes. So they can just head to www.thelisteningstation.com.au, and all the info and upcoming authors are listed on there.
So, Karina, what's next for you?
Well, Claudine, I have another book out with Pan Macmillan in December. So I am frantically working on structural edits right now, which is interesting timing with this launch. But I'm really excited by that book as well. This one travels to India. So I think the wanderlust fiction is somewhere that I will squarely stay. Yeah, I think that's what's to come. But I'm obviously very excited to see Duck on shelves finally. That's going to be a really special moment.
If listeners wanted to connect with you, how can they do that?
Sure. Well, I'm on Instagram a lot, so you can always slide into my DMs. I love hearing from aspiring authors, writers at Karina May Writes. The tag used to be, or Karina May Not. But Karina May Writes, she does have to write more often than not these days now that she's got a contract. Or my website, which is karinamayWrite.me.
Fantastic. Karina, I wanted to say congratulations once more on a wonderful novel in Duck à l'Orange for breakfast. I wish you every success. I've loved chatting with you today, and thank you for joining me on Talking Aussie Books.
Thank you so much, Claudine.
That's a wrap, folks. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, please drop me a line via my webpage at claudinetinellis.com, via Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Alternatively, consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. Until next time, happy reading.